Hello and welcome to the OFFGRID Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick. Today, my guest is someone who left the rat race years ago and has embarked on an incredible journey. Most notably, probably, is the 75 days she spent on Alone, Season 9. Karie Lee Knoke, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you. You know, oh gosh, darn. We'll edit that out. uh, so yeah, I'm excited you're here. One of the things that I always start asking my guests is to tell us your origin story.
Okay.
Let us know what set you down the path to where you are now.
Okay, I will keep it short as I am.
It doesn't have to be short. You can go as deep as you want to go. We like details.
I'm saying that I'm old enough to, you probably don't want to hear all 60 years of my life, but
Let's do it. 1 minute per year. That's an hour podcast.
Okay. So yeah, I grew up in suburban, north of Seattle area. Used to be a small town, the Bothell, Kenmore area of Washington. And as a kid or family, we used to go backpacking all the time. We used to go canoeing all the time. So camping was not foreign to us. Being out in the woods was just something we did. And after school, my brother and I would go play with the neighborhood friends and build fortresses out in the woods out in the back, that kind of thing. So we didn't watch a lot of TV. We were wild kids, I guess. At that time, it seemed normal, but nowadays, kids aren't really allowed to just go out and play with the neighborhood kids. All you had to do is come home from school, have a snack, go play, and be home for dinner. And that's it. We had our own kind of life, you could say. Yeah, going a little further back, I'm from a lineage of pioneers. My great-great-great-grandfather was a scout for the Oregon Trail.
Really?
Yeah, his pregnant wife came over on the second train, and they ended up homesteading in Goldendale, Washington. And I have a number of my lineages have all been immigrants or settlers who had come to Washington State. So I'm sixth generation Washingtonian before, actually could say Pacific Northwest Territorian, because Washington wasn't even a state at that time. So I have that in my blood, that incentive to explore. Like when I get to a place, I'm like a dog. I want to explore everything, and then I finally turn around and settle in. Like, here I am. But
Exploration's in your DNA. I like it.
It is. It's in my DNA and just how I do things. I can't settle into one thing until I've explored the whole area. Yeah, so that pioneering blood is in me, and otherwise I grew up pretty normal, maybe a little sheltered. I was painfully shy. I did not want to be seen. I didn't like talking. I would freak out if show and tell was like, oh my God. It's like I want to show things, but I'd be so scared to get up in front of anybody and speak. So you could say I've kind of matured a little bit. I'm getting used to it. And so yeah, I kind of did what we were told to do. My love was to be out in nature and up in the mountains. But of course, I went to college. I got a degree in computer science and business administration and a little bit in psychology. So I have this nerdy background. I have a very analytical brain, but I'm also very creative at the same time. And so, yeah, after college, I started my career. I worked for 5 years as a systems analyst, worked for Microsoft, PEMCO Insurance. I was a consultant all around Seattle doing the consultant thing, the corporation thing. Nobody will believe it. I have, and I still have, just to prove it to people, my blue IBM pinstripe suit dress. Because back then,
nice.
Back then, women did not wear pants, suit pants. We had to wear dresses. except for when I went to
Mm.
Microsoft, we had casual Fridays, and now casual attire is the norm in just about any field. But back then we had to be very professional, top notch, because we were consultants. So yeah, I still have my marketing suit and that pinstripe suit. I'll wear it for Halloween a couple times, and nobody will ever believe me that I wore nylons, high heels, and leather
I was gonna
briefcase.
say that's so crazy from how we're used to seeing you.
Right?
Such a 180.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, eventually I realized I kind of had a wake up call, like, what am I doing? I was sitting in rush hour traffic stuck in Seattle on I-5, and that was in 1993. And there was a lot of smog rolling in. And back then, the smog would kind of roll in, roll out. And I just realized this isn't leaving. I have to move. I promised myself as a child I was a little environmental activist as a child and even into my adulthood. I realized I needed to move because I promised myself as a child that I would never live in a place that was polluted. So I traveled for 3 years. I quit my job. You could say my mom always says the years she let her wild hair down. And I just took off and traveled for 3 years down to Central
Where'd you end
America.
up going?
I went to Central America a couple of times. I had $10,000 in my pocket, and I just traveled for 3 years and tried to live off my art or any little things I could find to do to make money on the way. And eventually, kind of all at once, three things happened. I broke my wrist. I rolled my truck. I think the transmission went out too. So
Because
I,
it rolled or before it rolled?
um, after it rolled, it was all within like a 6-month period.
Mm.
I got the truck fixed, and then the transmission went out, something like that. And I realized I needed to stop and get a job. I did not want to go back to Seattle, so I ended up in North Idaho, which is where I live now. And now I was just feeling like I needed to live in the mountains. I needed to live out in nature. And I was redefining myself as who I was. And really, that definition was not like I was redefining myself personally, but more my identity, which is outside of you. And realized that I knew who I was when I was a child. So I went back to like everything I loved about a child. I said, we're going to make this reality. So that's what I did. In the year 2000, actually 1999, December 28th, 1999, Y2K, I kind of went back and I was doing
Yes.
computer work because that's where the money was at.
Mm.
And at the end of the year, I bought a yurt, a 30-foot yurt, which was my office, and ended up moving into it. I went off grid, and I've been living that way ever since. Firewood's my only source of heat, collecting rainwater, solar power, and basically anything. I pictured my life as living in a big tent because I had the yurt, but anything I could do to connect to nature, be as close to nature as possible, is what I did. And a little piece of that I forgot what I was going to say.
That's okay. I was going to ask if you don't mind sharing. Do you like how old were you? Would you estimate when you found the need to reinvent yourself, or just get back to your roots?
Yeah. So I think I was going through my first Saturn return. So about 30 years old when I realized that I needed to change things. I moved to Sandpoint, I think when I was 34, around there, 36, 35. And then at 36, I was in a relationship, and that's when I got pregnant. And if you watch the show of Alone, I talk about my miscarriage. So I was 36 when that happened. That relationship ended up a few years later, dwindled away. And that's where I really got to step into what I really, really wanted to do. I discovered primitive skills in 2006. I went to my first primitive skill gathering. I went to winter count. I learned how to brain tan. And that's when I'm like, these are my people. This is my tribe. I just want to wear buckskin all the time.
What got you? Where did you discover primitive skills? Because I've heard of people from discovering it through internet forums or through classes that they did. How did you find it?
Yes, so that's before social media was even a thing. I went to a weekend workshop with some friends. This guy named Digger was there. And if you're in the primitive skills community, you know who Digger is. He is a master at brain tanning. He's good friends with Matt Richards, who wrote the book basically on modern brain tanning and primitive skills. And he taught me how to brain tan. And then he told me about primitive skills gatherings. And at that time, there were only two, Winter Count and Rabbit Stick, on the West Coast. So I found myself in Arizona. I went to Winter Count, loved it, fell in love with the whole thing. And at that time, there was about 200 or 250 people at a gathering. Now it has become so popular, you can basically just travel from one gathering to the next, to the next, to the next. And some of the gatherings are over 600 people. Whoa. So it's really grown in the last 10 years. Like,
are those gatherings, are they primarily on the West Coast now, or are they spreading throughout the
everywhere.
US or other places?
Yeah, they're everywhere. There's I think it's called Falling Leaf, and I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. I haven't been to the East Coast gatherings, but there are gatherings there. It's everywhere now, even in Canada and in Europe as well. I've been to the Global Bushcraft Symposium, the first one in Canada, the second one in Wales a couple of years ago. And bushcrafting, or primitive skills, is kind of a part of bushcrafting. It's kind of a leg of bushcrafting, is an umbrella term. And primitive skills falls underneath that umbrella. And it's gone global. And really, the reason why is because it's not really new. These are our ancestral skills that we have forgotten. So you can go to Thailand and people are still living in these ancestral ways. It was just never popular, But that's really what primitive skills are all about, is keeping those traditions alive. And they're traditions that we all share, no matter what race or background you have. We all have ancestors that use these skills at some point. And they may vary of how we did things, but we all had, it's survival. We all had to get our food somehow. We had to use primitive tools to do that. We all had to have shelter, and we adapt to our locations, and there are traditions for doing those things. And really, you have to be respectful of where it comes from. So they may be skills, but skills as a content, you need to have context, like why was it done a certain way, who did it, and respect those lineages and those traditions to honor where they came from. You don't want to just watch a YouTube video and say, oh, I know how to do this. You need to have that context to know why, where, how, and in a lot of instances, Native American especially, there's a lot of sacredness that goes along with it. You have to understand the ritual, the ceremony, and be respectful of that. We don't want to culturally appropriate something, but learning it is a great thing.
Well, speaking of those skills, I'd like to pick your brain, pun intended, because you're like awesome at brain tanning, and it sounds like that was one of the skills that really ignited your passion for it. Break it down for us. How do you brain tan? What's the process? Why would you do it?
thanks for asking that. And now like, oh, I should have worn my buckskin jacket. I almost did.
Next time.
I don't know. Brain tanning, yeah, is the art of making buckskin, a flexible leather, more like suede, out of deer skin. So I like to say there's about 7 processes. I mean, first you have to get the hide off of the deer. So you take that hide, it's got hair on it, and on the backside it's got a lot of flesh, meat, and fat. So you need to flesh off the meat and the fat off that side. And then you would soak the hide in some kind of a bucking solution, which could be wood ash, it could be, wood ash is the most natural. You could just let it soak and slowly rot in water if you'd like. It takes a lot longer to do that. You can use lye, KOH. There's a lot of dehydrated lime. And really what it is, you're doing a controlled rot. You're changing the pH level. And at some point, the hair will the hair will start slipping. And when that happens, you'll take the hide out of the solution, you scrape all the hair off, and now there's a layer of skin underneath the hair called the epidermis. In brain tanning, we call it the grain. And that's the skin, like if you were to dry it, that's the shiny side. If you were to tan it a different way, that would be like the shiny side of your purse or your belt.
Okay.
But buckskin, we're going to take that layer of epidermis off. So that's where we start with the graining, the scraping. Scrape that layer off. Then we go back to the other side, and now we want to scrape off the membrane, which is the fascia that holds the hide to the muscles.
Okay.
So we're taking off these 2 layers, and now we have just a network of fiber that's all intertwined, and it's super strong and flexible, or it's going to be flexible by the time you're done. In the clothing we wear, such as this denim vest, everything's woven. So we have 2 directions, like so, of fibers that are woven together. In a hide, they are all intertwined and meshed together. So it's way stronger material, especially for clothing. But now it's not soft. If you were to let that dry, that would turn into rawhide. It's just hard and stiff. So now we take that hide and we want to break up the fibers, work it out. We put it in brains, and there's other things, oils, fats, egg yolks, soy lecithin. There's other ingredients you can use, but we call it brain tanning because we use brains. And the brains are full of fat. So we put it in that brain solution. You make it like a brain smoothie. Put the hide in there, and then like a towel, you want to rinse the brains out, open the fibers up, stretch a little bit, put it back in the brains. I like to do it 3 times. Every brain tanner will say something different. And then once the fibers are opened up and it's soft and the brains have penetrated through all those fibers, now is the softening. So you have to let the hide dry. You move it. You might put it on a cable, stretch it, bounce some kids on it. Anything you can do to open up those fibers. And you have to keep it moving while it's drying. And then once it's dry, you have this soft, chamois, beautiful hide. Last step is to smoke it. And they say that the smoking is the actual tanning part. But smoking will preserve it. It coats all those fibers with the smoke resin and keeps it from, you can now get it wet and it won't go back to its original state. So that in a nutshell is brain tanning.
So I'm assuming, you're using the brains, I'm assuming, from the animal that you're taking the hide from. So, right. So like if it was a white-tailed deer, you'd use the brain of the white-tailed deer, or do you collect brains and have like an urn of, brain smoothie that you use?
Right. Both. If you kill your own deer and you'll have the head there and you want to cut off the antlers if you have those, But I would keep those brains because that's valuable. They say there's a myth that one brain of an animal will tan its own hide. That is not true. An elephant's brain is not going to tan its elephant hide. That might be enough, but I like to use more brains. So I will either collect them if I can. If I just cannot, I teach classes, so I need a lot of brains. I'll just order pork brains from the butcher. They send me a whole.
Okay.
So pork brains are great.
How do you keep it from going bad? Do you have to refrigerate it, or like how do you preserve how do you make brain preserves?
So you can keep them in a freezer. A lot of times when I get them in the butcher, they'll be in 1 pound containers. So you have to, in my case, I have to order a case at a time. You can put them in the freezer, or you can can them in jars if you want them to be shelf stable. And I've done that so I can travel with them.
And you don't mix it with anything else? It's just pure brain.
I freeze it as pure brain, but when I go to use it, I will heat it up a little bit, pick out any bones that I might find, and then I'll mix it with water.
Okay.
So to dilute it down.
Interesting. Is there okay, so you said you scrape off the epidermis, the stuff that makes one side of the leather shiny. Is like what's the reason behind that?
It won't soften. If you leave the epidermis, it's not stretchy. And so if you leave that on there, 2 things will happen. It won't get nice and soft and flexible. And 2, when you go to smoke it, it won't change color. So that's what makes it, that's the difference between a leather and a buckskin.
Okay.
Or suede, Got to take that epidermis off. And if you leave it on or leave like one little streak of it on, it shows up and it's not flexible on your finished product.
What's your like, what hide do you prefer to work with? Like, what's the easiest one to, like, let's say you're listening to this and you're like, you know what, I really got to try some brain tanning. What animal would you recommend? What's a good starter?
Yeah, typically we use deer.
Okay.
That's to get the buckskin. You can also use elk, but that's a huge project, so don't start there. Start with the deer first. Learn all your mistakes on the deer, and then if you're feeling strong and buff, then challenge yourself with an elk or a moose hide. If you want to leave the fur on, then you can use brain tanning. Like you can do rabbit hides with brains and squirrels and all those kinds of things. You can use brains. However, you may want to try bark tanning instead. And that's a different way. Instead of using the brains, you're using bark, and that's a whole nother method.
Sure. Yep. I've actually heard of that. They used to mark trees when they were harvesting them as a chemical tree. I'm trying to think of the species that I know they did that with. Gosh, it's not coming to me right now. It's hemlock, eastern hemlock. I think they used to use the bark of that specifically for tanning leather.
Yeah, there's a lot of barks. Oak is really popular. Mimosa is really popular. Makes a nice bark. Hemlock. In my area, we use, and I just learned this, Western red hemlock. It might give it a reddish color, but it takes a lot more bark. It's not as intense and strong as some of the other barks in the area. Going to experiment with red duck fur instead.
Okay.
Yeah, oak is a really popular one. It's a little bit lighter in color, but every bark in different tree species has a different color that it produces.
I've always wondered, if you leave the fur of the animal on, what keeps it from falling out afterwards? Or does it fall out?
That's a great question because there's many answers. So it depends on the type of animal. deer and the ungulates have hollow hair. And so, not all the ungulates, but the deer and elk, they have hollow hair. So they tend to shed. The hair will actually come out. But if you have a bison or, when any of the fur barrows, they don't tend to fall out because they're not hollow. And bark tanning holds on to the hair follicles better than the brains do. That's why I'm suggesting to use bark tan instead of brain tan.
Okay.
Yeah, they hang on to that hair just a little bit tighter. It's not as stretchy as you can get with brain tanning.
Interesting. And you recently did something tropical, I want to say. You want to talk about that at all?
Oh, I'd love to. I just got back 2 days ago, so I'm acclimating back into winter. But I went there. I went and visited Luke Olson from Alone season 10. And then Amos Rodriguez from Alone season 7 was there.
Where was this?
This was in Maui. I'm sorry, Maui,
okay.
Hawaii. Perfect weather, temperature. They have an overabundance of access deer. Access deer was introduced back in 1950, and there's no predators. So they have a real problem. So we stepped in and we went to do some hunting. We hunted for pigs, little piggies, wild pigs. And for access deer, we did get one. And I have, you'll see on my social posts that we got an access deer. I brought 3 deer hides home so I can bark tan them. While I was there, I offered a brain tanning course so I could share with local people there you've got all these hides, all these deer. What are you going to do with all these hides, which are just going to waste? So I wanted to share how the local people can actually use them, tan them, and make these beautiful things, purses, bags, whatever you want to make with these access deer hides that are there. So
that's really cool. So how responsive was the group that you were teaching? Did they seem to get into it?
Yeah, we got a lot of interest. I'm going to be going back again. Talked about going back this summer, or I might just wait till next winter when I really want to be there, when I want to avoid winter. But there was a lot of excitement about it, and definitely going back and doing it again. Yeah, next year, and doing a little more hunting. Finding the right place to do it is the key part.
So when did learning primitive skills and, going down this path of, reconnecting with the knowledge of our ancestors, did you say, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat into the alone ring and see what happens?
How did I get there?
Yeah. Yep. How did it go from like just learning and then moving into, the televised survival stuff?
Yeah, that was an interesting journey. I don't watch TV. Every once in a while I'll watch a movie. I'm off grid, so I don't. I always have so much to do. I'm not a person that gets bored very often. Unless I'm really, really tired, I might sit and watch a movie. But what happened is I was working with my friends at his company, working with young adults, the self-discovery program. And season 2 came out. So Nicole Apelian and Jose was on that show. And they're in the primitive skills arena. And after the show came out, my friend came up to me and said, "How come you're not on that show?" I'm alone. I'm like, "What show? What are you talking about?" I had no idea what they were talking about. And shortly after that, I was contacted by casting of the show for season 3. However, at that time, I only had a flip phone. They did it through Messenger. I didn't even know what Messenger was. Now, April, I was like, what is this? And I found this message they sent me in January for season 3. I'm like, oh, wow. So I called, and they called me back and said, "Oh, we just launched in Patagonia." But as it turns out, on every season, I knew two people on every season from the Primitive Skills arena before the show came out. So Lucas Miller and Randy Champagne on season 1. And then season 3, I knew Dave Nisha and Carly. And just so it was too late to apply, but I got interviewed. Season 4 was a duo. I didn't have a significant other or a family member that I would do that with. And season 5 was a playoff. So I applied for season 6 and did all my casting videos and was in the top 100 that went to history. And then there was narrowing it down for who goes to boot camp. And at the last minute, I had this premonition that Wonia applied for it. I'm like, oh no, because we're friends. So I ran up to my yurt, I looked online, and sure enough, on Facebook, she had one little post and she used the word survival. She would never use that word survival because we're all about thriving in the wilderness. She would never use that. So then I was bummed, like, oh no, we're competing against each other. We're friends. And so the history executives chose her to go. And I'm really happy for her. We're, super stoked for her. There was no animosity there, just a letdown for me because I worked so hard. And I kind of gave up. I asked for feedback and they said, well, we're looking for big personality. And I'm just this reclusive woman that lives in the woods. I'm kind of quiet, shy. Like I said, I was not used to wanting to talk in front of people. And so I kind of gave up. And meantime, Callie Russell goes out. Callie Russell was on season 7. Teresa was on 8. And then they called me back. And she said, will you please reapply? We need women with skills. Will you please reapply? So I did. And I got on. So that was my season. And I'm really grateful for the season that I was on. I loved it. I loved Labrador. I have no regrets. It just took me a while to get through, to get in.
For sure.
Yeah.
What was there anything that caught you off guard? Because probably by then, maybe you'd seen some clips or, had an idea in mind of what it was going to be like. Was there something that surprised you once you were finally in it?
You could say I prepared for this show for 50 years. At age 8, after reading My Side of the Mountain, I wanted nothing more than to go out in the woods and survive with nothing but my knife, like that kid did. And I had a lot of insight because my friends were on it, so I got some background information and things like that. But once I got out there, one thing most people don't know is I had the flu really bad. That's kind of why I tripped when I came out of the helicopter. My equilibrium was off. My heart was pounding.
Oh my God.
5-pound camera trying to film myself. I was overweight and I tripped on a stick. It's not a big deal. They made it look really dramatized. Like, she just went down. I'm okay. Just tripped on a stick. So I was sick for the first 2 weeks I was out there, and I tried as hard as I could, but I was exhausted and I was blowing snot rockets constantly. Probably why they didn't show too much of my footage for the first 2 weeks.
That is really hardcore. Like, you started off fighting the flu.
Sicker
That's
than
insane.
A dog.
Wow.
I couldn't even think, all the pre-interviews they do. I couldn't answer the questions. I'd start to answer and then I'd forget the question. And you can even watch on the clip where they show us packing our 10 items. I was like, this is my cast iron pot. I'm going to cook with it. This is my sleeping bag. I'm going to sleep in it. Really be warm. I couldn't think at all. But once I got over that, by that time, I'd lost a little bit of weight. I got my health back. So week 3 is when I really started to take off. And that's when I was starting my shelter. That's why I didn't even start my shelter. I didn't have the energy to do it. I think what surprised me the most, this is going to sound strange, was how easy it was. I felt like I never struggled. Basically, what I was doing out there is the same thing I would do at home. I'm collecting firewood. I'm building a smaller shelter than my yurt, but, I'm digging in the dirt to make my shelter. And at home, I would be digging in the garden, putting my garden bed away. I'm collecting food. I'm doing all those same things, but on a smaller scale. And when you're out there, you do not want to waste calories. So if you're like, I had to hike up that hill every day from the river to my shelter place. Once my heart started beating, I just stopped, rest, let my heart rate come back down and go again. So everything was slow. You don't want to sweat because now you're losing salt. And that's the key of survival, is you just go slow. And I think being sick actually worked in my favor because that really slowed me down. And even when my energy came up, I was in that mode of just going slow, methodically. And I never felt like I really struggled. It's work for sure. It's hard work for sure. But I'm kind of used to that. And to be honest, when I came out, I thought I was in fourth. I figured if everybody was doing this good, if I'm doing this good, everybody else is doing better, right? That's the way I told myself. But yeah, I was kind of surprised that it wasn't this charge hard and you can't keep up kind of thing. It was actually better to not charge and just slow down and relax into the whole scene. Yeah.
How do you replenish electrolytes in the wild?
It's difficult. There's certain plants that do produce sodium and those minerals, one of them being raspberry leaf. And I had raspberry leaf. It was yellow-green, but it has sodium, potassium, the magnesium, and calcium.
Do you eat it or do you make it into a tea?
I harvested as much as I could find because it was going to just turn yellow. So I harvested it as much as I could find, put it in my shelter to dry. I made tea with it, and I was mixing the tea with the Labrador tea, the leaves of the Labrador plant. And that was what was turning my water black and staining my teeth black. And took me a while to figure out exactly what was going on. And, people kept saying, oh, it's all the berries. I stopped eating the blueberries for a week and my teeth weren't changing. So the citric acid in the raspberry leaf was stripping the cast iron pot. And so that's what was staining my teeth. And because I'm older, the dentin on my teeth is a little thinner. The enamel on my teeth is a little thinner. So Tom had the same problem. He had the exact same pot, brand new, barely seasoned. And his teeth turned color too, but he's younger. So his teeth didn't stain as badly as mine did. Yeah.
So it's stripping the seasoning off, though. It's not like actually, you weren't getting like a high dose of iron then too, were you? Or was that?
Yes, that happened when I made my fruit leather too. So I'd make the fruit leather and then I'd have to use fish oil to re-season my pot. And then I saved the fruit leather till the end. And even though I'm starving, I could not eat. It was so hard to eat that fruit leather. It would taste really good for a moment. And then I would just taste cast iron in my mouth for the rest of the day.
Oh, man.
And I'd hold it up and my body would just cringe. Like, no, but I'm starving. No, I don't want to eat that.
Whoa.
Well, I said on the show, my friend Collette, who had cancer, she became my inspiration. And I said, if she can stomach chemo and radiation for 8 or 9 months to watch me on TV, because she had told me before I left that she was going to live long enough to watch me on TV. And if she could do that for 8 or 9 more months, I could stomach this fruit leather for 8 or 9 more days. And it was hard. It's hard to believe being that hungry and then you eat something and you're just like, and I believe that I had iron poisoning or something because my body was like not having it. But yeah, when I came in and we had a blood test and I didn't OD on iron, but it was tough. That was maybe one of my tougher parts.
That's crazy. Do you have to bring a cast iron cookware, or can you bring something that might not react that way?
You can bring stainless steel or not Teflon, the new,
Like the titanium stuff?
titanium. Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay.
You can bring titanium, and I almost brought cast iron. And next time, if I ever go out again, I'm going to really think about cast iron keeps your water and your food warmer longer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the benefit. And I love to cook with cast iron, but next time I might go with stainless steel. I don't want to look like a meth on TV.
You had like way when we started talking about your time on Alone, you had mentioned you don't use the word survive, or like the people in your circle don't use that term. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Sure. It's a different, I'm coming to the point where it's just a different perspective. So these are skills and traditions that we are trying to keep alive, but hopefully we're thriving. You know, when you're out in the woods, you know how to make your fire with the bow drill. You don't need all these tools. They're nice, like on the show, they give you 10 items, but as a child, I wanted to go with nothing but my knife. But I could make a knife if I didn't have one. I can make a bow drill kit. I don't need a ferro rod. So that's more about how we thrive out in the woods. And I know how to make a basket or clay pottery. I had a lot of clay. I really wanted to get to that point where I could make a clay pot. But I was always looking for the food. The food was the number one priority. I didn't get to craft as much as I wanted to out there. So, yeah, it's more about knowing how to live in the woods. You're living, you're thriving, you're not out there to survive. Your life is not in danger. That's kind of the difference. In surviving, your life is in danger. And so you need to know how to get out. And a good example of this is I got a program in my school called Survival Sisterhood, where I'm bringing in other instructors so that we have different perspectives of survival. So I have the primitive wilderness living skills. Jessie Krebs from my season 9, she's a SEER instructor, so she's got that military background. So I'm going to teach you how to learn how to live out in the woods. She's going to teach you how to get your ass home if something happens. So it's a totally different perspective. And I have Lindsay from Alone the Beast. She's coming to do like predator awareness and self-defense and some other things she'll be teaching. So it's there's so many different perspectives of what survival really is.
That sounds really badass. You're calling it the Survival Sisterhood. Is it just for the females out there, or can dudes show up and learn too?
I love that question. So here's the deal.
Okay.
Survival Sisterhood, I'm tell you what it's all about. Survival Sisterhood is for women learning skills from other women in a safe, non-judgmental, non-competitive, heart-centered, supportive, and safe environment.
I can see where the male dynamic could throw that off real quick.
So I just did a speech on this yesterday. We love our men. They're our husbands, our fathers, our sons, our nephews, our brothers. However, we're different. In the 70s, I grew up that, women are just like men and we can do anything a man can do and we deserve the right pay. That's true. However, we are meant to do things differently. We process our emotions differently. Our bodies, if you haven't noticed, are different. Men have upper body strength. Women have lower body strength. So even teaching primitive skills like bow drill, women do that differently than how a man, I like to use Cody Lundeen. I'm throwing out a lot of names today. Cody Lundeen might sit on the floor and use his pinky fingers and do a hand drill fire with his toes, And he can do that because he's got this muscle strength. Women can't do that. Women are going to stand up, put their fire kit on a stump, get their body weight over it, and maybe even ask another woman to help because women like to work in community. So we just do things differently. We metabolize different. We problem solve different. And women really need to have a safe environment to learn. Women, I'm speaking in general terms, but there's less competition. They don't want to feel pressured or judged that they're doing it wrong. And that's kind of what happens when their husbands try to teach their wives how to do something. They have a horrible time.
Mansplaining just doesn't work.
Yeah. So Survival Sisterhood is to create that space so these women can learn. And girls want to have fun, and we want to eat chocolate, you know? And
Well, see, now I'm seeing we've got some things in common.
right. So a woman is any woman, teenage girl, up any age. If you're a teenage woman, any age, if you identify as a woman, if you're a male and you really, really want to come and you feel comfortable dressing up in drag and trying to figure it out, we'll entertain that thought, but we'll see how that goes.
I think the beard might give it away.
Right? So we really want to create a safe space for women to come. And guys, listen to this. I want to say this to the ladies, actually. Ladies, this is already happening. Just think how excited your husband's going to feel when you come home and you're saying, hey, honey, look at this. Check out this knife I just got. And it's carbon steel and blah, 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 blah. Or, hey, check out, I want to get this particular bow, so that they can, because I'm teaching women's archery as well.
My heart's already aflutter listening to this.
Yeah, and we're having so much fun already as women, just getting together and here where I live, I've been doing women's archery every week, and we're just really creating a community, a network community, and our communities nationwide, it can be even global. The community aspect part of it is online. So we do an online course every month. And even tonight, we're doing our monthly circle up around the virtual campfire. So we talk to each other. I've been giving homework, weekly survival tips, and homework to do, little challenges. And then we talk about it, like, how'd you do? And then other one was like, hey, I did this. Like, oh, I didn't even think about that. You know, we did the starting a fire with a battery and aluminum foil.
Okay.
One girl got the flame right away, and I'm trying, and my battery's just getting really warm. And I discovered, like, that's a great way to make my battery staying warm for 5 minutes. So now I just created hand warmers. So the community aspect, the online community aspect is by membership. And we get together every month, courses. And then in summer, in July 9th through the 13th, we all come together for a 5-day retreat. And during this retreat, we all come together in person. And this is where I have the other instructors come in, where we're doing a broad perspective of survival skills. We're doing handgun safety, self-defense, women's natural health, because if you don't have your health, you're dead or you're dying. We're all dying, but you got to have your health. That's
absolutely
overlooked. The primitive skills, Jesse with the military background, evasion, the rescue, and all kinds of things. Whatever we want to learn, I'll bring it in. So I see myself as not as the ringleader or on top. It's not a hierarchy. That's a masculine thing. We are a circle. I'm just holding the space for all of these women to come together.
I think that's such a great idea. And I think that, and you'll have more insight into this than I do, but it seems like since people like you have been on shows like Alone, there's a bigger interest in women wanting to be a part of this and learning these types of things. Have you noticed an uptick, in your class?
Yes, I have. It's interesting because I have a lot of female followers. It didn't really start out that way, but as time went on, I have about 80% female followers. And I love doing the co-ed classes. So I do have a school. After alone, I've been wanting to start a wilderness school. It's called Sacred Cedars Wilderness School. And this is something I've been wanting to start for a number of years. I didn't have my own property to do that on because I've been teaching the skills already for 15 years. But right before I went out on the show, I purchased this property. So it was already in motion. And then I went on the show. So when I came back, I launched the school, and I've been offering, co-ed classes. I have a lot of co-ed classes. We have a kids camp. So kids spring break is coming up in 2 weeks. I have a family camp where the whole family can come. And then we're doing this women's thing. So I try to keep my classes so different demographics can come. I don't want to rule anybody out. I'd love to see a man show up and drag to
Be careful what you wish for.
I know.
Next thing, RuPaul's Drag Race is going to show up to your class.
But yeah, I try to have a little bit of something for everybody.
Right on. And you've been in Idaho for a while now too. I think the Pacific Northwest is like a gorgeous place. But man, it's cloudy and rainy a lot up there. Do you like the weather better in Idaho than in that Seattle area?
Yes, that was one of the, besides the pollution and all these people moving in back in the 80s and then again in the 90s, the 92 recession. The whole country was in recession except for Seattle because we had Boeing and Microsoft. That was really what got me out of there. But the weather, yes. I loved Idaho because we have 5 full seasons. We have winter, which is kind of long. We have summer, which is gorgeous but pretty short. We have fall, spring, and right now we are on mud season.
Mud season. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm hearing of that 5th season. That's exciting.
Mud season is when all the snow melts. We got a lot of runoff. The ground that's been frozen solid is breaking up. The roads are falling apart. So because it's rural, most of our roads, except for the highways, are gravel. And so the hoarfrost is collapsing, and now we have mud. And you can look at my truck. It's definitely mud season right now. But we'll have another 3 or 4 more weeks, and then we're on to spring. Right
on. For, someone who's listening, particularly maybe a female audience, or, maybe a guy who's trying to get his gal excited about not survival training, some survival training. We'll have to come up with a new word for that. But, for these people who are like wanting to take that step into getting into something like this, what do you recommend they start with?
I would recommend starting with Survival Sisterhood. And in Survival Sisterhood, we are using that word. It just encompasses a lot of different perspectives of what survival is really all about. The key, I've got 2 thoughts going in my head right now.
Okay.
So for you husbands out there that want to get your wives excited about what you are doing and into your world of the outdoors, and whether you're hunting or whatever it is you're doing, have your wives come to Survival Sisterhood, because we are also not just learning skills, but we're empowering women with self-confidence, self-reliance, and all those things that they can strengthen courage so that they're able to step into a survival situation when they need to, but also anything that comes along in life, to have the strength and confidence to like, I've got this, I can handle this, and not feel like I'm not good enough. I'm just a wimpy girl. We're changing that paradigm. So it's very holistic in a way. The other thing I wanted to mention is the inspiration behind Survival Sisterhood is on the show. I dedicated my journey to my dear friend Collette, who had, when we met 13 years prior. She had breast cancer. She healed that. She's an amazing healer. 13 years later, it came back as mastized in her bones. And believe it or not, she healed that as well. That's what she was dealing with while I was out on the show. She healed that as well. And then she got one spot on her liver, and she passed away on the night of the second episode. So she got to watch me on TV. But while I was out there, like I said, she became my inspiration to survive because of that fruit leather. I didn't want to eat it. If she can do chemo, I can do fruit leather. And she wanted to be part of the school. She wanted to purchase the property with me and help me create the school. And then she knew her life would be short than normal. And when she was gone, I would have that part of the property to keep going with the school. That didn't happen because the cancer came back and she had to stay in Portland closer to healthcare. And I am dedicating Survival Sisterhood to her because I know that's what she would want. And part of this network of women, how do we support each other, is so I actually have a member in our sisterhood, a sister that she has breast cancer and she's going down that path. And I asked her, how, as we as women, support you? And she said the exact same thing Collette said. All I would love if someone would just go for a walk with me or watch a movie. Like, how simple is that? And so we can create that with this network. If someone's in Nevada and just needs some company or maybe a little help with rent, we can help that. It's just the little things, companionship. So that's how we support each other as women. And for the retreat, 10% of the proceeds of the retreat that comes in, we are creating a fund to donate to cancer services, particularly breast cancer. We're focusing on breast cancer for women.
I think that's an amazing endeavor and a beautiful message too. Just something as simple as having somebody, give you the sense that you're not alone. It goes, such a far distance.
You're not alone, and those women are truly in a survival situation.
And
we tend to ignore that. We think of survival as going out in the woods and living off the land. We're kind of ignoring the true sense of what survival is.
I agree. It's good to bring that perspective back around. Well, I've got two questions for you left. We talked about your school, Sacred Cedars, and the Survival Sisterhood. Where else can people find you if they want to look you up and see what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Karie Lee Knoke with the underscores. And I'm on Facebook, kind of in 3 different places. Sacred Cedars Wilderness School has its own page. I have a public page, Karie Lee Knoke. And to be honest, I don't use that very much anymore because people found me on my personal profile, which is just Karie Lee. And so I'm on those 3 places on Facebook. And I have a website, which is, again, karieleeknoke.com, and that's where the school information is. I also have a healing practice. So I'm here in my office right now. You can see a Meridian Man back here and my herbs and things like that. So I do energy healing work. That's on there. My time about alone. Everything's on that website. So you can find everything there.
Awesome. And then my last question, if you could condense all of your knowledge and experience into one golden nugget of survival wisdom, what would that be?
Whoa. That is a good question. First thing that comes to mind is to do your dream, but that was my message for the show, is get out there and get outside and do those things. One golden nugget. I'd like to say it all comes down to connection. This is what I have to offer. the primitive skills. I'm thinking of a birthday cake, intelligent birthday cake. The platter is the root of the primitive skills. It's your ancestral skills that connects you to your ancestral roots. I think this is why primitive skills is so popular. It gives us a place of belonging because we all have ancestors. Even if you don't know who they are, we share that common ancestral root. So that's a connection there. And then the next layer is the survival skills. We have to survive. We have to know how to survive, whether it's a modern way or a primitive way. You have to have that piece. So that's the layer of the cake. The next layer would be like, now you're thriving. So how do we make things easier? How do we make baskets? How do we do pottery? More the crafting type of primitive skills. And now for the best part, we have the nature connection piece. That's the icing around the cake. How do we connect with our environment? That's a huge part of hunting, is we have to know how to listen, how to track, how to feel, use your intuition. Like, I think the deer are over there, the wind's coming from this direction. That's your connection with nature. I love hunting just for that reason, that you're so connected with your environment, what's going on around you. You have to know the habitat. You have to know how the animals behavior patterns. That is nature connection. So that's the icing on the cake. But then we have this conduit that's within ourselves, where we grow from the ancestral skills up through, now you're building the confidence. And on the top of the cake is this candle. And that candle is your connection to spirit. And how do we light that candle on the top of the cake? What's your passion? What are you here for? Why are you here? To help remember who you are and why you're here, which is the song I sang on Alone, to remember who I was and why I was there. But my goal is, how do we light each person's candle so they're connected to spirit and they have all that connection of their environment, nature, and their ancestors. That was kind of a big nutshell, but
I love it. So I love cake and I love the analogy. That was perfect. Karie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you again.
It's good seeing you too.